The last puzzle. It started with nothing. With a text message that came at 3 in the morning and consisted of one word, ship. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't received such messages in 10 years. The last time was the word dragon, and then it cost them a promise at the police station and a broken gate. Ship was next in their childhood disaster code. That meant, I'm in a desperate situation. I need help. Silence. Mark was a successful architect. His life was built of glass, concrete, and clear lines. He had a wife, a mortgage on a loft in the center, and a schedule scheduled by the minute. His childhood friend, Sergey, stayed in the provincial town where they grew up. Their friendship slowly died from distance, different interests, and silence on social media. Mark considered this chapter of his life closed. He had partners, colleagues, connections. There were no friends. He tried to call. The subscriber is unavailable. The feeling of anxiety began to grow, forming a cold lump in the pit of my stomach. He remembered their childhood agreement. The ship is not a joke. This is the last cry for help. Drop everything. Get. No questions asked. The wife woke up and asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm going away for a couple of days." The case of an old friend. What friend? She wondered. Mark realized that he had never talked about him. Sergey was a ghost from another dimension. The journey took a whole day. Mark raced through the familiar but changed streets, feeling the veneer of the capital's Polish crumble off him layer by layer. He was just Mark, who was afraid for his friend. Sergey's house turned out to be small and shabby. The door was opened by his mother, who had aged 20 years. When she saw Mark, she burst into tears. "Markusha, Seryoja is in the hospital. He refuses to fight." It turned out that 6 months ago Sergey was given a terrible diagnosis. He went through chemotherapy, lost his job, and his girlfriend left him. He just gave up. When Mark entered the room, his heart sank. The strong, always laughing guy with whom the 10 of them were throwing themselves in gym class was a shadow. His eyes were empty. "Why did you come?" Sergey asked hoarsely, looking at the ceiling. "You sent the ship," Mark said, pulling a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket. "I got it. I'm here." Sergey turned away. "It was a mistake. Go away. You have nothing to do here." But Mark didn't leave. He rented a room in a nearby hotel and showed up the next day with a huge box. It contained an old, battered 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, with an image of the spaceship Enterprise from Star Trek. They started assembling it at the age of 12 and never finished it. "We're not leaving here until we're done," Mark said, scattering the parts on the hospital table. "According to our rules." Sergey was angry, saying that it was infantile and stupid. But Mark sat in silence and stared at the details for a long time. On the 3rd day, Sergey, cowering in pain, suddenly reached out and inserted one tiny piece. Then another one. While putting together the puzzle, they started talking. Not about the disease. About how they tried beer for the first time at the age of 14. How Sergey got into a fight with bullies, defending Mark. How Mark helped him prepare for his physics exams. They were laughing. For the first time in months, Sergey was laughing. One night, Sergey became very ill. Mark, without saying anything, lay down next to him on the hospital bed, hugged him by the shoulders, as he did in childhood when Sergey was afraid of thunderstorms, and began to tell funny stories from their youth. He talked until he fell asleep, and then he sat until morning, watching his friend's chest rise and fall. The day came when there was only one piece left until the end of the puzzle. The last piece of the starry sky. "Here you go." Sergey handed it to Mark. "You have to. It's your job to finish what we started." His voice was weak, but there was a twinkle in his eyes. The one Mark had known since he was 7 years old. The fire of struggle. Mark inserted the last part. The ship was ready. They sat and stared at him in silence, a symbol of their childhood dream of adventure, gathered here in a hospital room at the most difficult moment of their lives. "Thank you for coming, brother," Sergey said quietly. "I thought I had nothing left to hold on to. But it turned out that there is." The next day, Sergey agreed to a new, experimental treatment regimen. If you've been putting together an old puzzle for me, he grinned, then I can try. Mark returned home 3 weeks later. Mark looked at her, and then at his perfect, sterile loft. On the wall, directly in front of the desk, in an expensive frame hung the same puzzle. A spaceship on a background of endless stars. He's fighting, Mark said. And he will live. Because he has a friend. He was no longer afraid to admit to himself that in his structured, adult life there was a person for whom he would give up everything at the first word. And there was no weakness in that. This was his greatest strength.